Hello everyone, I'm Armstrong Williams and welcome to another special edition of the Armstrong Williams Show from NBC 25 affiliate in Flint, Michigan. You know, I want to say this. Some of the people that I admire the most are law enforcement officials. You know, we hear stories about racial profiling, unfair beatings, intimidation, law enforcement officers abusing their badge and their code of honor. But in my entire years, I've never had a bad experience with a law enforcement official, ever. Because one of the things that my father taught me is that whether I'm right or wrong, if I'm stopped by someone with the badge, humility is the way. And because what I may see may not be what they've seen. And so therefore, I'm always communicative, I always listen, I don't get an attitude. And I think a lot of law enforcement has to do with not only the attitude of the officers, but the attitude of the person that's being stopped. Because listen, these guys and women get up every morning with families. They leave these families behind, and they have no idea if they're ever going to see their wife, their children, their parents, or loved ones ever again, because they put it all on the line. And for that, they deserve high praise, just like our men and women in service. So let me say that first and foremost. And because of such tremendous respect that I have for law enforcement, we wanted to do a show today for Flint, Michigan, just on law enforcement. And we're going to do it differently from what the script has said it would be. We want to talk about these men in uniform. And we've assembled a very elite guest set of guys with us today. Nothing against women. We just had to take what was given to us. But you know, women, we love you and respect what you do also when you wear that badge. So let me introduce our guest, William Federspiel. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You are in Saginaw County Sheriff.
Yes, sir.
Glad to have you. Now, I met Mr. Potberry, John, some time ago. I was much younger then, but I want to welcome him. He's a Special Assistant Prosecutor and Attorney for Genesee County Prosecutor's Office. I want to welcome him. And the most serious one over there who refuses to smile and wants to look all serious. I can imagine when he stops somebody, they think this guy's all mean and grumpy because he won't smile. But I know behind that is a good, kind-hearted guy. So we got him to smile. There you go. Captain T.P. Johnson, Flint Police Department. Let me welcome all you guys to the show. You know, I noticed a couple of you guys are carrying. Let us see your guns. I want people to see these guns. So let me see your guns. You know, those guns you hate to use. That's the last thing you want to do is pull out those guns. I love guns. I love the right to carry. And why is it that when people think that because you carry that gun, you can't wait to use it on somebody, and how could that be further from the truth?
Well, I think a lot of it stems from our fascination growing up, especially for me, watching police shows on television. We get to see all of the action, and so as children, we see police officers regularly on television in shows using their guns. Even on cops, they show the in-action type of shots. And so children are fascinated with that because I think they grow up watching it on television, they see it in the news, and so they're fascinated with something that maybe they've watched through media. And even as a child myself, we always grew up playing cops and robbers. I was always one of the cops. I never wanted to play the robber as little kids. We'd always do that running around our neighborhoods in Saginaw. And so I think there's always been a fascination in our society with firearms.
Now, John, you know, it's so important, especially from the prosecutor's office, it's so important, first, everything, even in politics, if someone does not like you, therefore they don't trust you. If they don't trust you, they won't vote for you. So much of the relationship between a community and policing has to do with the fact that you like your officers. You trust your officers, because when you trust and you like them, you will share more. You feel you have a friend and not a law enforcement official. How do we change the perception in these communities that police officers are just everyday people trying to protect you, trying to help make sure that you're safe and secure in your neighborhoods and your communities?
Well, I know in the city of Flint, in cooperation with the Michigan State Police, they have regular meetings in the community of Flint. They go to a local school or a church, and they do this on a regular basis, and they allow law enforcement to meet face-to-face with those citizens in those neighborhoods. And they've done that with a conscientious effort recently in the past year or so just to break down those barriers, those walls of distrust between the community and law enforcement. And that's one real tangible way we can try to break down those walls, and we've been doing it in Flint. And I give a lot of credit to the Michigan State Police and the City of Flint Police. Chief Tolbert has been at those meetings, I've been there, and that's one way we can help build some trust between the two sides.
You know, Captain Johnson, I don't look at anyone on the panel and based on their race and make any kind of judgment. I don't think anybody commits a crime because they're white or black or because they're a woman. I think people commit crimes and do injustices based on behavior, based on the fact that they're desperate. Sometimes they're not taught the right values. And so much of policing today, when you listen to these court cases on TV, it's all about profiling. They're against black people, they're against minorities. But I want you to explain to us today, it's very difficult not to profile someone who's a serial killer and the person that witnesses have seen looks like you. You gotta say the guy's white. And if you live in a neighborhood in an inner city and the majority of the kids that are committing crimes just happen to be minorities, Latino, or black, and if a crime is committed, you gotta say, in order to expedite stopping this culprit, you got to say the description is the person is black. It's not that the profile, it's that the behavior of this person just happens to be black. How do we get, especially young black men, from thinking that they are the profile of crime and not the behavior?
Well, that's a good question. In the city of Flint, our police department, we really just do not have time to profile. I was raised by parents who taught me to take a person as they come, as they are. Dr. Martin Luther King said he wants his children to judge a person by the content of their character, not of their skin, the color of their skin. We don't have time for that. But when you're giving a description of a suspect, the race is just a part of the description. We're all the same. We're all the same underneath, and because you're wearing a dark suit and black skin doesn't make you any different from me in a blue police uniform and white skin. We're still just men trying to do the best we can.
Men just trying to do the best they can. We will continue. This will be a provocative discussion. Call your friends, tell them to turn on that TV, because it's about to get serious. We'll be back. Bill Federfield, there's something that I believe. If the biggest city in the country, New York City, can drastically reduce its crime rate, so can Flint and any other place around the country. What is it that New York has that Flint doesn't?
Well, I can't comment on Flint. I'll comment on Saginaw. We'll use Saginaw as an example. I hate to delve into my brothers and sisters to the south.
Okay.
But I've often thought about that, watching what's happened in New York City, and not just over the last few years, but over the last 20 years, starting with Mayor Giuliani and the 3 strikes and you're out to clean up Manhattan and especially the Broadway area. If a large city like New York can do it, we absolutely can do it, but we have to prioritize that. And when I say we as a community, so not just me as the sheriff, but we need the chief of police, the city council, the county commissioners, and the people we serve and answer to, the public. We need them to help us to formulate a plan moving forward to prioritize what it is we're going to do, how we're going to attack the problem and solve that issue. And if we all work together, which is what we are trying to do in Saginaw every single day, we will be able to accomplish what New York has set as a standard.
John Potberry, how early on in a home or in a community does a parent or a leader or a teacher begin to see criminal traces, unusual traces and behavior and symptoms in a child's behavior, which knows that it could really lead to crime, destruction, murder, rape? And how should they go about it? Because obviously the problem for me is you can't arrest somebody until they commit the crime.
That's true. We are in a position where we're often reactive. We are reacting to crime. And that's not a fun position to be in.
No.
But kids as early as 3rd grade can begin to show signs that they're heading down the wrong track in life. They start missing school and skipping school. They start hanging out with the wrong kids. They start maybe stealing a neighbor's bicycle. They start shoplifting very early on. They start becoming involved in the drug trade because the older kids in the neighborhood and the drug dealers, the adults, use them and exploit them, and they can start very, very early on in a child's life.
So parents have no control. Parents cannot change this. Are parents also threatened by their own children?
Yeah, that's true. As they get older, they become more bold, and they do some very, very horrific things. We see it all the time in Flint, Michigan, where the parents do lose control. And you need to intervene very early on. The community needs to intervene along with the parents.
How does one intervene?
Parents, when they see these signs, when they see their child that's maybe they're disrespecting their parents, there have to be rules at home. I think everybody understands if you have rules in the home and they are enforced, that's step one. If there are no rules in the home, then the larger community isn't going to really have a lot of control either. It all starts at home, and unfortunately, as you know, it's well known, in Flint, Michigan, we have a lot of single-parent homes. We have children being raised by grandparents. In 2014, we're now going into great-grandchildren being raised by great-grandparents. And it's been a generational thing that's been building up. And it's a very complex issue. I can't answer it in 20 seconds or a minute. It really takes a lot of dialogue.
Are you telling us that you did not answer the question?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying to talk about Flint, Michigan, where the violent...
I think you did a pretty good job, actually.
Where the violent crime is happening in Flint, Michigan, there are a lot of forces at work.
Well, let's try something different here. Let me go to Captain Johnson. Let's do the reverse here. Let's talk about people who have turned their lives around, who've abandoned crime, who've gotten on the straight and narrow. Sometimes we always focus on the criminal element, but what about people that don't get involved in crime? What is it that goes on in their lives, who come up in the same circumstances, may have exhibited the same behavior, but something changes? What is it in a person's life that changes them off a path to crime? What is it in their person's life that make them realize, I want to be a contributor to society, not someone who becomes a menace to society?
I think there's a lot of different factors that come into play. Mr. Potberry touched on a couple of them. Family and how you were raised has a lot to do with how you end up. If you empower your children and just let them do whatever they want and tell the teacher, oh, you can't touch my child. We don't spank in the schools, and I'm not advocating spanking in the schools. But it worked for me.
And it worked for them.
But we have children now that are never told no. And they're never told they can't do something. That's not allowed. They're just, you do what you want to do, you can do whatever you want. That is a recipe for disaster.
Wait a minute, come on now, come on. You guys are being too nice here. Listen, we all had that when we were coming along. We had the same issues. You know what's different today? I was not influenced by video games. Those video games.
It's a big factor.
It's a fact, but you're not talking about it. I mean, as parents, when we were coming along, we've had the same issues, but we did not have all this different menu of media that these kids have access that not only compete for the child's mind, but take it over. But it's as if these kids are possessed. That's what we need to talk about.
We're raising a generation of children with the attention span of a fly. They go right from this and this, and it's immediate gratification. We're not teaching our children, you have to work to get it. And back to your original question, it's when a person gets to that point in their life where they say, I'm not gratified by doing this thing. I'm not gratified by stealing this car. My life is there's no point to it at this. I'm just stealing and I'm just hurting people. When they realize there's no fulfillment in that, there's no true.
Well, why do they get fulfillment in these video games and this media culture that's perpetrated on them that just totally transfer? Why do they get fulfillment there? They have attention span for that. Why is that more entertaining? Because it's destructive? Because they want to hurt people?
When they play video games, it's boom, 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 boom. Run from one scene to the next scene.
But they're killing people.
In some of them, they do, or they're stealing a car, or they're blasting it. And
but whatever they're doing is
have
what you arrest them for. It's what you normally arrest people in society for.
Yes.
We'll be back. Don't go away. I'm Armstrong Williams. And welcome back. Let's just talk among ourselves. But what else is missing that we're not talking about? Obviously, there are parents who are not parenting because they don't know how. But even for the good parents, they lose good sons and daughters. What else is going on? What is lurking?
Well, growing up as in a single-family household on the east side of Saginaw when I was a child, my mom was struggling to make ends meet, working 2 jobs to take care of my brother and I, and so we were home a lot by ourselves. However, she made sure the neighbors were there to make sure to keep us on track. An aunt, an uncle, a grandfather would come by. I don't think necessarily that the issues that are at hand, there's opportunities all the time, there always have been. There were opportunities for me to go down the street and hang out with the kids who were smoking or drinking or doing other things, but I had someone there to keep me on the right track and tell me that's not going to happen today, and you won't lie, you won't do this.
Structure.
Structure, you know, my grandmother must have prayed 1,000 rosaries for me.
Pray.
And,
Boy.
you know, my mom, no matter how tired she was, would make sure to take me to church over
Church?
at St. Casimir's. Yes.
That's a foreign word.
And I'll tell you what, with that, there has to be a principle. Everything that we do must be based on a truth. That truth has to come from a higher power.
Truth.
Yes, and we must take that seriously as a society. And as a law enforcement officer, I have an obligation to make sure that I speak the truth, and not based on myself. I'm not that smart, but based on a higher power of God and with Christian principles.
You had a story about the video games.
Yeah, you were just a minute ago talking about how videos have taken over, social media has taken over our young people, and just put up a wall between the parents and the kids. Well, there's a very real example of where a video game did kill somebody. There was a 20-something-year-old man who had purchased an Xbox from his ex-girlfriend's brother. Well, come to find out, the Xbox did not work, and he bought it for $60. So the person that bought the Xbox game waited for him outside a store. When he came out, they got into an argument, and a gun was pulled, shot and killed him in broad daylight over an Xbox game. I think that points to, not that Xbox games kill, but our young people these days, the teenagers, the 20-somethings, they have no respect for life. They just don't understand that when you pull that gun out and shoot somebody, it's over, game over. And that connection between life and death has been lost on our young people today.
And what about, you know, what about the penal system? I mean, I can understand murder and rape, but, you know, the drugs, sometimes if you do get caught with drugs, marijuana and cocaine, you do more time for killing somebody. How do you reconcile those laws?
Well, we don't. The people do, and the legislation do, the legislators do. We enforce them, such as they are. We may agree with them. A lot of guys agree with the idea of legalizing marijuana. Some people don't.
What laws, if they were to change overnight, could bring down crime by 30 or 40%? That literally could change the landscape of crime. Anybody?
I don't know that there would be enough money to support the criminal justice system. When you talk about fighting crime and strengthening laws, you need more police on the streets, you need more prosecutors in the courtroom,
And they're cutting police
you need
here.
more clerical staff, you
Yeah.
need more judges, you then need more prisons. I'm not sure we could ever spend enough to tackle the problem through toughening our criminal laws. That's a part of the solution, but there's much, much more to it. I don't think the taxpayers would support a tax increase big enough to really tackle crime with a tough on crime approach.
I recently talked to a young man, he's 24 years old, spent 18 months in prison for theft, running a theft ring. And the number of times that he was in our system, I don't think we need to change the laws or change the sentences, but instead of saying, okay, you got caught and now we're going to just give you probation. If the sentence says that you have to spend a year in jail, then spend the year in jail. But otherwise, I think it becomes a mockery of our system when we start delaying those types of things multiple times until such a time that then people say, well, there's no consequences to my actions, and then they go out and commit the big crime. So for all the petty crimes that they committed, we don't have space in jails, et cetera. I understand that. But if we were to go back to a system with other countries that have very strict rules and laws, they have very strict laws here and rules, but if we enforce them from the onset instead of delaying them, I think that would be beneficial.
You know, when we come back in our final segment, I can't believe it, this show's about over. You know what's fascinating? Stand your ground laws in Florida and in Texas. Crime in Florida has been reduced by 38% in Florida and 51% in Texas. something's going on. Something's working. I can't figure it out, but I'm sure you guys can give us an answer when we come back. And do we need more stand your ground laws for those who rail against it? I'm Armstrong Williams. We'll be back. Okay, John, what's the jury on stand your ground?
Well, Michigan doesn't have something called stand your ground, but you do have a right to defend yourself in Michigan. You can use, if somebody is threatening your life or somebody else's life, you have a right to defend yourself by taking someone else's life. I don't advocate that. We always advocate get to a place of safety, call 911, let the professionals do their job. But in Michigan, you do have the right to defend yourself with lethal power. It's an open carry state. You have a right to carry a gun. It's a shall issue state with regards to concealed pistols. As long as you meet the certain basic criteria, you can get a CPL permit. So I don't know that there's a lot of difference between us and Florida.
TJ, what about intervention and prevention? More police on the ground. They're cutting the budgets here.
Well, in Flint, yes, we have. Our staffing has been cut. It's an economic problem. It's not a people problem, but it's an economic situation. In the last 2 years or so, we've been in partnership with the Michigan State Police. We have many more Michigan State Police working with us in our detective bureau in partnership with us. We have them working on the streets with us, where they're able, while Flint officers go around and answer calls for service, these officers, state police, are freed up to do traffic stops and do some traffic enforcement. And a lot of times with traffic enforcement, you find violations, drugs, guns, and that type of thing. The proactive policing that we were referring to earlier.
So Federspiel, we'll wrap this with you. Do parents realize that their children are engaged in criminal behavior and protect them instead of saving them by working with law enforcement?
Well, some do. I would like to say, though, that we're focused on a real small group of individuals in our society that commit the most violent of crimes. The majority of people, over 200,000 that live in Saginaw County, are good people raising good children. That's the first thing. I don't want people thinking that we have horrible communities and everybody's bad and all the kids are bad. When parents, I remember my mom telling me, you're going to turn that television off. And that was just cable television back then, when we had it, when it was first coming out. You're going to turn that off. Do parents realize what's going on? Some do. Some do. Some get a kick out of showcasing their children's bad behavior and putting it on Facebook. I really hate that. My wife will show me every once in a while, look at this little kid's acting out and he's talking to his mother, calling her by her first name, and he's only 2, but she thinks it's funny. I said, that's going to be a problem later down the line if that's the type of value system that child's being taught. So,
Man, can you believe we're out of time, Federer? John, TJ, Heart Out, we're out of time. Man, you guys are great. We must do this again. We're coming back to
Sounds
continue
good.
this. Good day, everybody.